This video contains spoilers for Strange World.
You know, for a movie called Strange World, this wasn't really all that strange. If anything, it should have been called The Clades. When I first saw the trailer for Strange World, it kind of reminded me of The Croods, you know, the two Croods movies from DreamWorks. There's so much more things stranger in The Croods than there is in a film that's actually called Strange World.
Animated science fiction adventure movies have never been something Disney has had much luck with. But that doesn't stop them from trying.
And Disney Pixar did try their hardest with the Buzz Lightyear movie, but that was a flop as well. But not for lack of marketing, it was just a confusing premise. And it's pretty damn obvious why Strange World was royally screwed over by Disney in regards to its marketing. Probably to do with the LGBTQ plus themes in the film, but you know, we can't assume that's the only reason. I think they just didn't know what to do with it. This has been a thing with animated Disney science fiction adventure films for the longest time. This just isn't their strongest suit. Come to think of it, I can't really think of an animated science fiction adventure film that actually is successful. I mean, I can think of Titan AE or The Iron Giant maybe. This is without taking anime into account here, because I know there are hundreds of science fiction movies and adventure movies within anime. The only other movies that come to mind in regards to animated science fiction adventure films would be maybe 9 and Disney Pixar's Wall-E. Big Hero 6 was more of a action hero kind of flick, and Ron's Gone Wrong sadly just didn't get the attention it deserved. There's DreamWorks Home, which is pretty forgetful in spite of having Jim Parsons voice the main character. Oh yeah, there's DreamWorks Robots as well, which I guess you could call a science fiction movie. And let's not forget Next Gen either, which is a bloody brilliant movie that definitely deserves more attention. And DreamWorks Megamind was kinda science fiction, but much more about turning the superhero genre on its head rather than science fiction itself. I can't believe I forgot all about Mitchells vs. the Machines. I am such an idiot. It's just a shame that when you think of science fiction adventure animated films, Strange World is just not going to spring to mind. In spite of its title, to me it just wasn't strange enough and felt really derivative of films that Disney made before in a similar vein. For instance, Father Takes Off. Characters make friends with a small, squishy, cute and very marketable sidekick character. There's even a quote in the movie where a character straight out says,
"I want to merchandise it."
The crew on the ship mutiny against the main characters, and characters discover the world they have been exploring is in fact not a world at all, but a giant mechanism, or in Strange World's case, an enormous turtle. Does this feel familiar to you? All three movies, Strange World, Treasure Planet and Atlantis containing airships, feels more than a coincidence to me. I mean, yeah, of course movies of the same genre are gonna have similarities like this, but come on. I was also reminded of Pixar's Up, because both movies start off with a sepia short film setting the tone of the story like many adventure films from the 50s or 60s did. And hey, look at that! More airships! Hooray! Though I did adore the 2D sequence at the beginning, and it's just a shame that the entire film wasn't in 2D. It feels like it should have been. Look at this! This looks amazing! It also seems to be asking the question, what if electricity was introduced to a society a century or two earlier, and that hover technology replaced the horse and cart instead of petrol motors? I would have loved to have seen this explored a little more, a bit like how Treasure Planet was 70% traditional adventure and 30% science fiction. Though Treasure Planet felt more steampunkish to me with aliens populating the universe, Strange World felt more like what Treasure Planet would have been without the aliens and maybe only 5% science fiction. There's also elements that remind me of Disney's Atlantis. The main character is a nerdy misfit who is taken on an adventure where he lives in the shadow of his parental figure. Slideshow of the route they need to take shown in front of a misfit crew. One of the crew even asks him if he could forge his dad's autograph.
Mr. Clade, my name's Caspian. I'm a huge fan
thank you.
of your dad. Do you think you could forge his autograph?
What?
You know, the guy who left his family 25 years ago and is, for all they know, probably dead. The guy who left and never came back and yet is still somehow seen as a hero by the town of Avalonia, and who Searcher still has to live in the shadow of, who even Searcher's son also has to do the same. Yeah, the theme that seems to be running rampant in not just
Disney animated movies. Almost every single animated movie company has a franchise that focuses on the father and son relationship, and Strange World has 2 of them.
Disney, no matter how many times you try to deal with father and son stories, you're never going to be better than a Goofy movie.
Another similarity with Atlantis is this shot 20 minutes into the movie, which shares a striking resemblance to this shot from Atlantis, which is also under 20 minutes into the movie. Yeah, let's put this one down to coincidence.
I mean, I really hate to compare all 3 of these movies, but because they're from the same studio, they seem to have very similar problems. Disney just plays it too safe when it comes to science fiction adventure films. I mean, Strange World does have its dark moments. I mean, look at this. Unless I missed something, Lieutenant Duffel gets killed off in the movie and is never mentioned again or grieved over at any point. At least in Treasure Planet, when Mr. Arrow was killed off, there was a moment for Captain Amelia to process what happened. Duffel, to me, was, even though he only had a few lines, was the most interesting character out of all of the crew on Venture. It felt to me like Duffel was killed off just to give the mother something to do through the movie. I mean, seriously, she spent all of the movie behind the wheel of Venture and doing very little else. More to the point, killing off a character in a movie that has no villainous bad guys while portraying the creatures in Strange World to kill off a character deliberately makes the statement "there are no bad guys" said later on feel really weightless.
In a movie where there are no bad guys, the so-called creatures who we are told aren't the bad guys because, as Ethan says,
there are no bad guys.
Hammering home the point that there are no bad guys in this movie when you clearly show the creatures killing off a character deliberately doesn't really make the audience accept this statement as fact. If anything, it just feels like yet again Disney is avoiding making anyone or anything villainous by instead making the antagonist of the movie generational trauma.
No bad guys? What kind of game has no bad guys?
That's just poor storytelling.
Okay.
Pointing out your problems doesn't make them go away.
After I watched the trailer for this movie, I kind of assumed that Searcher's dad either got separated or got lost or was assumed dead because they got lost and never found him.
But seeing how, no, he just walked away from his team after his son said they should examine the unusual plant that they discovered that is giving off electrical properties. An explorer, to me, is someone who travels in search of geographical and scientific information. Finding a plant that has the ability to produce electricity is for sure an amazing discovery. Why did Jaeger storm off telling his son Searcher that this wasn't the reason for their exploration? Jaeger's goal was to make it to the other side of the mountains because he believed that what would save their home was on the other side. Okay, but this made him blind to what was staring him right in the face. A plant that literally could power his home. I just don't understand how or why an explorer would do this. Or more to the point, I don't understand why a father would just walk off and leave his son in the middle of a mountain. Later on in the movie, Jaeger tells Searcher how he ended up in Strange World.
The ground gave out.
Okay, so what the movie should have done is have the crew see this happen, try to save Jaeger, but he falls so they assume he's dead. This way it makes more sense for Avalonia to still hold him up in high regard as a hero, and Searcher finding him in Strange World would be far more emotional but still have the question, which Jaeger does answer later, why didn't he come back to Avalonia? To me, an explorer who just strolls by an amazing discovery like this, or ignores his son, who is clearly a botanist, doesn't even take the time to listen. But hey, without this we wouldn't have a movie now, would we? So Jaeger goes missing for 25 years and the Venture crew discover he has been living in this amazing underground strange world for 25 years, and the guy doesn't really seem to be any different even after living alone away from other humans for so long. I mean, in How to Train Your Dragon 2, we see Hiccup's mother Valka, who had also been living away from humans and living among dragons, showed some psychological awkwardness, but Jaeger just talks to his son like he's meeting a fan at a comic convention.
You're in the presence of the one, the only Jaeger. Dad?
Okay, so he compares Searcher to being an oddly shaped rock and implies he did have conversations with said rocks, but to me it's just not showing enough and leaving it up to comedy instead. So I sat down to watch this movie expecting exactly what I got. An adventure science fiction movie that was visually spectacular but story-wise incredibly underwhelming. And though the film got screwed over in marketing, and a lot of people are pointing to the fact that this film has LGBTQ representation with Ethan and his love interest who happens to be a guy, which yet again feels like bait, frankly, because we only see them get together at the end of the movie. I think it would have worked far better if Ethan and his love interest snuck on board the venture, and Ethan struggles to tell him he likes him throughout the movie, and his dad and his grandfather give him conflicting advice. You know, make the love interest actually a part of the story throughout the movie, instead of, just a footnote. This seems to be a bad habit when it comes to Disney movies. Sadly though, I honestly don't think this movie would have done well even if it didn't get screwed over with the marketing. It's a story that feels all too familiar, a retread of stories we have seen before, not just from Disney either. It had the potential to be something visually different, but I just didn't feel like it was, well, strange enough. It was a little underwhelming, but it is a movie I would return to, again purely for the visuals and the self-awareness jokes. But other than that, there's nothing much else to talk about, which is a real shame. Oh well, I'm Mad Munchkin, stay creative.